Orwell's 1984 is often compared to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Both books were written in the odor of World War II. Each describes a system of social engineering. In Brave New World, the subjects are governed from cradle to the grave, or rather from the womb to the incinerator. The description of genetic engineering, the conditioning system, and the class system in Brave New World is unforgettable. The description of this totalitarian regime in Brave New World towers over the plot. The description of the system in 1984 also towers over the plot, though the system is different. The plot in each case is important because it reveals the limits or obstacles to the success of the totalitarian system. But the story is the system in 1984, and the system emerges mostly in part one. The system is what is memorable about this book. The centerpiece of the system is Ingsoc, short for English socialism. But not really. There is no consistent content to Ingsoc. The real centerpiece of the system is the party. The party enforces a narrative on the population. The party makes it in the interest of all middle class and upper middle class workers to embrace whatever the narrative happens to be at a particular time. If we are at war with Eurasia, then we hate Eurasia and have always hated Eurasia. But we might switch. If we become allies with Eurasia and declare war on East Asia, then we love Eurasia and always have. That is what the party does. It maintains a narrative. The party maintains this narrative through formal and informal actions, with government institutions and with social pressure. Going along with the narrative requires that citizens turn off their minds and make the narrative part of their souls, such as they are. Outward compliance with the narrative is not enough. The party, the state, and the social order combine to stamp out thoughts contrary to the narrative. Thoughts contrary to the narrative are what are called thought crimes. The chief elements of the narrative are that the present is better than the past, and the future will be better than the present, that the experts running the country are infallible in their search for the public good, that this society is plagued by wreckers and subversives, all traceable to a man named Emmanuel Goldstein, the leader of the opposition. The party maintains this narrative through its control of public information, through constant surveillance of the citizens, through a network of secret police called the Thought Police, and through stigmatizing and isolating all who show any signs of dissent from the narrative. Let us consider a couple of formal institutions that maintain the narrative. There are 4 government ministries that promote the narrative. The Ministry of Truth is concerned with news, education, and so on. The Ministry of Peace is concerned with war. The Ministry of Love maintains law and order. And the Ministry of Plenty deals with economic affairs. The Ministry of Truth, where the main character Winston Smith works, keeps all the changes in history that need to be made. One of the problems with maintaining a narrative is that circumstances change, and the future may not always look like the narrative makers said it would. Winston's job involves changing history so that it matches the narrative. If some formerly prominent member of the ruling party commits a thought crime, that person is unpersoned or written out of history. We say canceled. If some prediction about how many shoes are being produced falls short, the Ministry of Truth must go back and change the prediction, or it must manipulate the new numbers. One great example from the text is a story about chocolate rations. Chocolate rations are being lowered. This would seem to be bad news, but the Ministry of Truth lowered the amount of chocolate that was previously allowed and made the lowering seem like a rising. The whole Ministry of Truth depends on a bunch of forgetting, or as they say, memory holding. Things that we thought we knew have to be forgotten. Winston questions the narrative because he cannot exactly forget. He looks around the city and sees that it's a dump. Nothing works. Everything is run down. It's dismal and ugly. He wonders, were things really worse before the party took power? Before Big Brother started watching and governing? Winston's job involves changing history and in creatively telling lies so that the narrative can be maintained. Winston's question is a natural question. Are the people in power trying to hide the idea that things have gotten worse? Is the party infallible? Winston knows that there are mistakes. His job involves fixing them to make history conform to today's narrative. What Winston needs to do is called doublethink. Think two contradictory thoughts at the same time. He needs to know that his job is to change the past to make the future look better, and to know that the future was better. Doublethink. So the Ministry of Truth constructs the narrative. Then the narrative is unloosed on the world and is maintained by other formal institutions. One of those formal institutions is the 2 Minutes of Hate. This is a group activity where the face of the wrecker and subversive Emmanuel Goldstein is put on a screen for all people to see. Then everyone in an office, for instance, would frantically deliver venomous attacks and screams at Goldstein. The heat rises to a frenzy. People shout, "Swine, swine, swine!" It was impossible to refrain from joining in. And those who are insufficiently filled with hate, those who do not positively angle to torture or smash faces or scream like a lunatic, they would be suspected of subversion, of being a Goldstein shill. The women, from Winston's perspective, were especially taken with these 2 minutes of hate. He, Winston, disliked nearly all women, and especially the young and pretty ones. It was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents to the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies, and the nosers out of unorthodoxy. The formal 2 minutes of hate probably spills into an informal social power. This is what Orwell describes in the second section of Part 1, where he shows us Winston at home and visiting his neighbors. The neighbor's wife has a plumbing problem. Things are always breaking down. She asks Winston to help fix it. Her husband, Parsons, is described as follows. He was a fattish and active man of paralyzing stupidity, a mass of imbecile enthusiasms, one of those completely unquestioning, devoted drudges on whom even more than the thought police, the stability of the party depended. This father is involved in a bunch of activities, getting the kids on board with the party's narrative. In their home, there are banners for the Youth League and the Spies. There is a poster of Big Brother. The kids go to the community center. They play games where they can accuse one another of being traitors or Emmanuel Goldstein or thought criminals. The children are being taught to spy out their parents, and the parents live in terror of that happening. Again, let us look at Winston's observations about his neighbor's life. Another year, 2 years, and the kids would be watching her night and day for symptoms of unorthodoxy. Nearly all children nowadays were horrible. What was worst of all was that by means of such organizations as the Spies, they were systematically turned into ungovernable little savages. And yet this produced in them no tendency whatsoever to rebel against the party discipline. On the contrary, they adored the party and everything connected with it. All their ferocity was turned outwards, against the enemies of the state, against foreigners, traitors, saboteurs, thought criminals. Whereas Huxley's citizens are taught only to have pleasure, the citizens of Orwell's book are taught to hate without getting too much experience with bodily pleasures. The kids are also members of the Junior Anti-Sex League. People would lose their mothers or fathers or husbands or sisters or friends down the memory hole, but nobody was allowed to notice. If you noticed, you were calling into question the narrative, and that's a thought crime. This created an incredible tension within Winston's soul, as you might imagine. Again, let us read. His mind slid away into the labyrinthine world of doublethink, to know and to not know, to be conscious of a complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to use logic against logic to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever was necessary to forget and then to draw it back to memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then to promptly forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. Tough work. And if you show any signs of weariness or tension in your soul when you are engaged in doublethink, the thought police are there to observe. They have screens all over. They spy out face crimes, where people show insufficient enthusiasm for the narrative. They spy out thought crimes. There are public hangings, sometimes to encourage fear. But for the most part, the party governs through controlling information and making any thought or action contrary to the party grounds for banishing or unpersoning. And since human beings want to belong, they obey. They go along to get along. The party is itself broken into parts, the inner party and the outer party. The inner party runs the show. The outer party obeys the inner party and runs society at its behest. One figure in the book, O'Brien, is part of the inner party. Winston, his neighbor Parsons, Winston's lover Julia, and all the bureaucrats who fill these ministries in the middle management positions are the outer party. All members of the party are expected to place their deeds, words, and thoughts in the service of the party. The party is not ideological. It narrows the range of thought and increases the power of those who control the narrative. Outside the party, both the inner and the outer party, are the proles, the ordinary drudges who take no part in ruling the society and who live their lives according to more traditional human standards. They do not have that much patriotism, we learn later. They were governed by private loyalties, which they do not question. Relationships mattered to them. They might cry or laugh. They were loyal to one another. They seemed to love their fellow man and be willing to help him. They are willing to leave one another alone. They can enjoy a beer. They seem to remember the past. They have more human concerns. Winston clearly recognizes that the proles are more human than the party members, and he claims that, if there is hope to bring down the party, it lies in the proles. So Winston spends some time with the proles. If only they could somehow become conscious of their own strength, the proles would not need to conspire against the party. They needed only to rise up and shake themselves like a horse shaking off flies. Winston goes and visits the proles in Part 1, Section 8. He asks them if the past is really worse than the present, but they are too ignorant and inarticulate to answer. The proles can't articulate a thought. If they tried to overthrow the party, it would be an incompetent mess. They are leaderless, thoughtless, without ambition, and without organization. They have a species of simple patriotism, perhaps, and a simple faith, but the perspective of the party they are bitterly clinging to God and guns and to the past that they don't understand. So there is a party system and a narrative system. As I say, the system is the story in 1984. The rest of the book is how the system deals with Winston and Julia, the two who commit thought crimes and actual crimes. What motivates Winston to disobey? What aspects of human nature does the party have the most difficult time with? That is, the story of Winston and Julia's love affair. Let us turn to that love affair in the next video.